Reformed thinking presents the deep dive. When we talk about theology, about God, about the universe, there's this pressure, isn't there?
Oh,
A
absolutely.
pressure to make it all small, to fit these enormous, life-altering truths into a neat little box that we can easily understand. A soundbite.
We want the simple answer, the comfortable answer.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're doing a deep dive into C.S. Lewis's argument against that very instinct. We're drawing from his book, Mere Christianity, specifically the section he titled The Invasion.
A very telling title.
It is.
Ah.
Our whole mission here is to get a handle on why Lewis claims that real Christianity has to contain difficult ideas, why things like sin and rebellion, and yes, even the devil, aren't just optional extras you can edit out. He says we're living in enemy-occupied territory.
And if that's your starting point, well, the solution isn't going to be a simple nursery rhyme.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So Lewis, he starts by sort of clearing the ground. He wants to set aside the philosophies that people grab onto precisely because they're easy, because they don't demand too much.
The simple paths.
The simple paths. And he identifies two big ones. First, there's atheism.
Right.
He doesn't spend a lot of time on it here, but he basically says it's an inadequate explanation for reality. It just can't account for the moral dimension of our lives, which is a theme he comes back to again and again.
Sure, the idea that we know things are right and wrong.
Exactly. But the second one is, I think, much more interesting for our discussion. It's the one he calls Christianity in water.
I think we all know what that looks like. It's everywhere.
It is. It's this reduction of the faith into its most palatable form. It's the belief in a good God up in heaven, and because of that, everything down here is, fundamentally all right.
The celestial grandfather idea? God just wants everyone to be nice and happy.
That's it. It's a very comfortable, very sentimental belief. And it's designed specifically to avoid any kind of, cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
It avoids the hard questions.
So to keep that comfortable feeling, what does this Christianity in water have to cut out? What gets left on the editing room floor?
Well, everything that makes Christianity what it is, really. It has to get rid of every difficult, every terrifying doctrine that actually calls for a real response from us.
Like repentance?
Repentance is the big one. If everything's basically fine, then you don't really need to worry about original sin. You don't need to think about spiritual judgment or the reality of hell.
And you certainly don't need a devil.
You absolutely don't. And most critically, the entire violent, dramatic story of the redemption becomes, sort of unnecessary, superfluous. Why would you need such a drastic rescue mission if we're not in any real danger?
So these doctrines are removed because they introduce a conflict, a war.
Yeah.
And simple religion can't handle a war.
It can't. And Lewis then goes deeper and says this whole expectation, this demand that religion should be simple, is based on a totally false idea about how reality works.
Okay.
We have this, this desire for neatness, for things to be clean and logical. But Lewis says, just look around you.
Yeah.
When you look closely at anything real, it's not simple, even if it seems that way at first.
This is where he brings in that fantastic example of the table.
Yes, the simple wooden table. On the surface, what could be more straightforward? It's solid, it's brown, it's flat, it's simplicity itself.
That's such a classic C.S. Lewis move, right? Take something
Yeah.
completely mundane, something you don't even think about, and just pull the philosophical rug out from under you.
He was a master at it, because the moment you stop just looking at the table and you, as a thinking adult, ask, what is this thing, really? The simplicity just vanishes.
You fall down a complete rabbit hole.
Instantly, you're thrown into all these layers of complex mystery. You ask a physicist, and they'll tell you the table is mostly empty space.
Right, it's just atoms whizzing around at incredible speeds. It's not solid in the way my eyes tell me it is.
Not at all. Then you ask, well, how am I even seeing it? And now you're talking about light waves bouncing off it, hitting your optic nerve, your brain, doing this incredibly complicated processing job to turn electrical signals into the conscious experience of brown and flat.
So just recognizing a piece of furniture involves quantum mechanics, biology, neurology, all these things we barely understand.
Exactly. The table isn't simple. It's this meeting point for a dozen interwoven mysteries. And Lewis's point is, if it takes that much complexity just to explain a piece of furniture,
How can we possibly demand that the nature of God, the structure of the universe, and the problem of human existence be any simpler?
you can't. It's just not logical. If you're content with the explanation you'd give a child, that's fine for the child. But if you, as an adult, really want to know what's going on, you have to be ready for a difficult answer.
It seems like the core problem he's flagging is that a lot of people who attack Christianity are really just attacking the kindergarten version of it.
Precisely.
They find a flaw in a Sunday school story meant for a 6-year-old, and then they hold that up as a reason to dismiss the whole thing, using it as a shield against the actual adult doctrine.
Lewis calls it a silly procedure, and he says people do it consciously or maybe more often unconsciously because they want to find a reason to dismiss the faith. They attack the childish version.
And then what happens when you present them with the robust theological adult version?
They pivot immediately. Instead of actually grappling with the ideas, the full structure of reality with sin and judgment and redemption, they suddenly complain that it's too difficult.
So first it was too simple, now it's too complicated.
Right. They say, well, if God were really good, he would have made religion simple. They have this idea that simplicity is beautiful and a good God must love beauty, so it should all be easy.
Which, as Lewis points out, completely misunderstands what Christianity even claims to be. It's not a set of rules God just invented that he could have made easier if he felt like it.
That's the disastrous assumption. If it were just a system of rules, maybe they could have been streamlined. But Christianity's claim is that this is God's statement to us about certain unalterable facts.
Facts about his own nature, about our nature, and about the way the world actually is.
Yes, and facts aren't simple just because we want them to be. You can't simplify the law of gravity because you find it inconvenient. And in the same way, you can't just wish away the reality of sin to make your worldview more comfortable.
That's such a key way to reframe it for anyone listening. We're not talking about religion as a set of rules. We're talking about religion as a description of reality.
And Lewis pushes that description a step further. He says reality isn't just complicated, it's also, in his words, usually odd.
Not just intricate, but weird. Unpredictable. It doesn't follow the neat patterns we expect.
No, it doesn't. And this is where he gets really interesting because he draws a line from this spiritual oddness to what we see in the physical world. He says nature itself doesn't seem to care about our desire for, aesthetic tidiness.
He uses the solar system, which is a perfect example because our minds, we love geometry and logic. We expect order. If you're told that planets orbit the sun, you instinctively anticipate some kind of mathematical elegance.
You'd think they'd be spaced out at equal distances, right?
Or maybe the distance increases by a neat ratio, like it doubles each time, or follows some beautiful sequence. You expect it to fit on a clean chart.
And you'd expect the sizes to be regular, too. Maybe they get progressively bigger or smaller, something that feels designed with our sense of order in mind.
That perfect, symmetrical, human-designed neatness. But what do we actually find when we look at the solar system?
A total mess from that perspective.
Yeah. There's no rhyme or reason that's immediately obvious in the sizes or the distances. It's asymmetrical, sprawling. It almost seems random. And then you look at the details, like the moons.
It's all over the place. One has one moon, another has 4, another has 2, some have none, and then one has this huge, bizarre ring system. It's an eccentric reality. It completely defies our preference for simple geometry.
And what's the theological takeaway from that? How does the messiness of space apply here?
Well, the application is just stunning. Lewis suggests that this faith we hold as a religion you could not have guessed.
Meaning if it was too neat, we should be suspicious.
Exactly. If Christianity offered a spiritual universe that was perfectly logical and obvious, a salvation plan that fit neatly into our human ideas of justice and fairness, well, we'd have every reason to think we just made it all up ourselves.
It would be too convenient.
Too convenient, too symmetrical. But the actual doctrines are anything but God becoming a man, the sovereign of the universe submitting to a criminal's execution, a resurrection from the dead, a life that demands daily, difficult spiritual struggle.
None of that is what you'd invent if you were designing a comfortable religion.
Not at all. He says these doctrines have that queer twist about it that real things have. It's the strange, the unexpected, the counterintuitive parts that give it the ring of truth, because it feels like something that comes from outside our own imaginations.
So if we want an answer that actually lines up with reality, a reality that's both complicated and odd, we have to be willing to leave the simple, comfortable answers behind. The problem isn't simple, so the solution can't be simple either.
It demands that we accept a certain cosmic messiness is part of the truth. And that insistence on facing all the facts, not just the convenient ones, brings us to what Lewis sees as the central problem that any serious worldview has to deal with.
Okay, what is that central problem?
It's this. We live in a universe that contains a huge amount of what is obviously bad. suffering, injustice, things that seem meaningless. But, and this is the absolute key, the universe also contains creatures, us, who know that it's bad.
We have an internal moral standard that judges the external world.
Yes, we're trapped inside a system that often seems broken, but we carry within us an undeniable memory or knowledge of how it ought to be. That conflict is the breaking point for the simple philosophies.
Both for atheism and for Christianity and water.
Both. Lewis says only two worldviews really take this conflict seriously. Only two look at all the facts, the brokenness outside and the moral law inside, and don't blink.
And those two are?
First, the Christian view, which says this is a good world that has gone profoundly wrong. It's a rebellion, it's broken, but it still has the memory, the moral DNA of what it was created to be.
That moral law written on the heart, as a Reformed tradition would say.
Precisely. And the second view is dualism.
Okay, so what is dualism, basically?
Dualism is the belief that there are two equal and independent powers in the universe. They've both existed forever. One is entirely good, the other is entirely bad. And this universe is just the battlefield where they are locked in an endless war.
And Lewis actually gives dualism some credit at first, doesn't he? He calls it something like the manliest and most sensible creed on the market, next to Christianity.
He does, and it's because it takes the conflict seriously. It doesn't pretend the world isn't a war zone. It correctly identifies that feeling of being pulled in two directions, of a war going on inside us and around us. It acknowledges that spiritual tension.
So it's more honest than the simple philosophies.
Much more. But after giving it that credit, Lewis then shows that it has a fatal philosophical flaw, a catch that makes the whole system impossible when you really examine it.
And what's that catch?
The problem comes up the second you say that the good power and the bad power are truly equal and independent, co-eternal. Neither one made the other, and neither has any final authority over the other. If that's true, then our whole idea of morality just completely falls apart.
How so?
Well, think about it. If they're just two equal forces, and each one thinks it's right, then what do we actually mean when we call one good and the other bad?
Right, they're just rivals. One likes creating, the other likes destroying. One likes gentleness, the other likes cruelty. They're just backing their own preferences.
That's it. And Lewis says that leaves you with two options. Option one is that when we say we side with the good power, we just mean we happen to prefer it. Like you prefer coffee over tea.
A subjective taste.
A subjective taste. And if that's all it is, we have to stop talking about good and evil as if they are objective standards. Saying cruelty is evil becomes no different than saying, I don't like broccoli. It's just your opinion.
But nobody actually believes that. We all believe that kindness ought to be preferred over cruelty. Whether we feel like being kind in the moment or not, we believe it's an objective standard.
And that's the hinge of the whole argument. The moment you insist on that, the moment you say one power is good, with a capital G, you must mean it's the one you ought to prefer, regardless of your feelings. You're saying that the other power is actually objectively wrong, mistaken.
Okay, and why is that a problem for dualism?
Because the moment you say one of them is wrong, you have just introduced a third thing into the universe.
A standard of some kind.
A standard, a law or a rule of what is objectively good that stands above and outside of both of them. And that standard has to be the ultimate reality.
So if there's a rule that judges both powers, that rule, or the lawgiver who made it, must be the real God.
The real ultimate God. That third thing is, as Liz puts it, farther back and higher up than either of them. So the two powers aren't ultimate anymore. They are both subject to this higher law.
And what we call good and bad is just a description of their relationship to that ultimate God.
Yes. One power is in a right relationship with him, and the other is in a wrong, rebellious relationship. And just like that, the whole idea of a war between two equal sovereigns collapses. It's not dualism anymore.
That's a really clean, logical argument. But he doesn't stop there, does he? He says you can come at dualism from a totally different direction, just by looking at the nature of badness itself.
Right. He asks us a very practical question. If dualism were true, the bad power would have to be a being that just loves badness for its own sake, purely for the sake of being bad. But do we ever actually see that in real life? Do we meet people who are cruel just because cruelty is wrong?
It doesn't seem to work that way. Even the most terrible acts seem to have some other motive behind them.
They do. Lewis uses cruelty as the test case because it seems like the closest thing to pure malice. But when you dissect it, he says you find other drivers.
He points to two main ones. First, there's sadism, which is a perversion where cruelty is linked to some kind of sensual pleasure for the person doing it.
That's corrupt pleasure.
And the second, which is much more common, is that the cruelty is a means to an end. You're trying to get something. Money, power, safety, control.
And this is where he makes this incredible counterintuitive point. Pleasure, money, power, safety in themselves, these aren't evil things. As far as they go, they are good things. Or at least they're desirable parts of a normal, healthy life.
So the wickedness isn't in wanting the thing itself, it's in how you pursue it.
It's entirely in pursuing that good thing by the wrong method, or way too much, or at the expense of something much better. This completely changes how you have to think about sin.
Lewis is arguing that badness can't exist on its own. It needs something good to spoil.
Yes. Goodness is original. It is itself. Badness is only spoiled goodness. It's a parasite. You have to have a healthy body before a disease can come and corrupt it. The disease doesn't create anything new, it just ruins what was already there.
And that plays out in our motivations. A person can do a good deed for the pure sake of goodness, even if it's hard, and they get nothing out of it. But Lewis claims nobody does a cruel thing just for the sake of cruelty being wrong. They do it because it was, in some twisted way, pleasant or useful to them. They were getting some kind of corrupted good out of it.
That parasitic relationship is the key. Go back to the sadism example. We call it a sexual perversion. The word itself tells you it's a twisting of something that was originally normal and good. You can explain the perversion by starting with the normal function, but you can't explain the normal by starting with the perversion. The dependency only goes one way.
So let's bring that back to the bad power and dualism. If this being is supposed to be eternally and independently evil, it would have to be able to create its own evil from scratch.
You would have to supply its own impulses, its own desires. But Lewis says this is impossible. He calls the independent bad power a mere bogey. For it to even be bad, it has to have good things to want, like power or victory, and good impulses to pervert.
Even its own existence is a good thing.
Existence itself is a good thing. Intelligence is a good thing. Willpower is a good thing. For the bad power to do anything at all, it has to use these tools. And where did it get them?
It can't have created them itself, because they're good.
It must be constantly borrowing or stealing them from the good power. To be effective in its malice, the bad power has to use weapons that it could only have gotten from its enemy. And that is the final nail in the coffin for dualism.
The bad power isn't independent. It's part of the good power's world. A part that has gone wrong.
A part that has gone terribly wrong. And this whole philosophical line of reasoning leads directly to what Christian doctrine has been saying all along.
That the devil is a fallen angel.
Exactly. That's not just some story for kids. It's a precise theological statement recognizing the fact that evil is a parasite, not an original thing.
If the devil were an eternal independent being, that would be dualism.
But because he is a fallen creature, a being who took the good gifts of intelligence and will and existence that God gave him and chose to corrupt them through rebellion, he proves his own dependency on God with every move he makes.
It's a sobering thought. That every quality that makes a wicked person effective, their cleverness, their determination, their charisma, are all good things in their essence. They're just being twisted and misused.
They are wielding borrowed weapons against the very one who provides them. And this is why Lewis is so careful to distinguish real Christianity from both dualism and the watered-down version. He admits that once you get past Christianity and water, the real thing is much closer to dualism than most people think.
In what way?
In that it takes the dark power seriously. Lewis says when he first really read the New Testament, he was surprised at how often it talks about a mighty evil spirit, a real force behind death and disease and sin. Christianity agrees with dualism on one key point. This universe is at war. There is a real, personal, external enemy.
But the nature of that war is completely different.
Completely. It is not a war between two independent powers. It is a civil war. It is a rebellion.
A rebellion that took place inside the kingdom of the one true king.
Yes, the dark power was created by God. It was good when it was created. Powerful, intelligent, beautiful. And then it used the free will God gave it to go wrong. The fight is between the rightful king and a group of rebels, not between two equal sovereigns.
And this idea of a civil war is what leads Lewis to his most powerful, most defining image for the human condition.
It is. He sums it all up by saying, enemy-occupied territory, that is what this world is.
And if you let that image sink in, it changes everything about how you see the Christian story. It's not a self-help program or a cozy philosophy anymore.
No, it becomes a desperate, dramatic wartime story. The gospel is the story of the rightful king, the one who has total sovereignty over this territory, landing behind enemy lines. He landed, as Lewis says, in disguise.
And the purpose of that landing.
The king is here to call everyone still loyal to him, all of us trapped in this occupied territory, to join a great campaign of sabotage.
I love that word choice. Sabotage. It's so active. It's not about just sitting back and waiting for rescue.
Not at all. It means you are actively working against the enemy's operations. Every act of true kindness, every moment of forgiveness, every choice for integrity over corruption is a piece of sabotage against the rebel network.
This metaphor even makes sense of things in the Christian life that can sometimes feel a bit abstract, like going to church.
Right. In this wartime setting, attending church isn't just a social gathering or an ethics lesson. Lewis says you are listening in to the secret wireless from our friends.
You're getting your orders from headquarters.
You're getting your orders, you're being reminded of who you are, whose side you're on, what the king's strategy is. It's the communication line that keeps you from forgetting that you're a loyalist in a hostile land.
And that explains why the enemy, the occupying force, would be so desperate to stop us from listening to that broadcast.
Absolutely. The tactics are often simple, but they're insidious. Lewis mentions just plain laziness. It's hard to get out of bed on a Sunday. But he says the enemy is much more effective when they play on our conceit,
Our pride.
and especially our intellectual snobbery.
That feels very relevant for today. The idea that smart, sophisticated, modern people are surely past the need for something as old-fashioned as church or reading an ancient book.
That's the whisper campaign. The enemy tells you that kind of thing is for the simple-minded, the uncritical. Real intelligence means figuring it all out on your own, independent of the king's official communications.
It's the parasite at work again, using the good gift of intelligence to encourage isolation and rebellion.
It's the classic move. And Lewis knows that by saying all this, by framing it as a civil war, he's bringing the devil back into the conversation for people who've tried very hard to get rid of him.
People will scoff. They'll say, "You don't really mean, in this day and age, you're reintroducing the devil with hoofs and horns and all that."
And I love Lewis's response. He's so dismissive of that chronological snobbery. He says he has no idea what the time of day has to do with an objective fact.
He's not bothered about the cartoonish image.
Not at all. The hoofs and horns are irrelevant. But in every other way, his answer is an emphatic yes, I do. He fully affirms the reality of a mighty evil spirit, a real power behind the corruption we see in the world. The rebellion has a general, and we need to take that general seriously.
So the whole story of the gospel, the incarnation, the cross, the resurrection, it's all framed as the king's costly and dramatic invasion to reclaim his territory from these rebels.
That's why it can't be simple. The problem is a cosmic war, so the solution had to be a cosmic victory. The cost of liberation was immense.
That really brings it all together. We started with this human demand for religion to be simple. We saw how Lewis sets aside the easy answers, atheism and Christianity and water, because they don't face the facts.
Right, and then we saw that the very existence of objective evil requires an objective standard of good, which points to one ultimate sovereign God. Dualism can't stand.
And most critically, when we looked at how evil actually works, we saw that it has to be a parasite. It can't create, it can only spoil. It has to steal its power, its intelligence, its very existence from the good.
The fact that the rebellion can even function is a backhanded confirmation of the king's authority, since the rebels are using his borrowed goods to fight him.
Lewis leaves us with a really chilling final thought about this dark power. He says he doesn't know what the devil looks like, but he suggests that if someone truly wants to know him better, they will be allowed to.
But then he adds that sharp warning. Whether you'll like it when you do is another question.
That is a stark warning. Because if you follow the logic of his argument, getting to know the nature of the rebellion means getting to know the nature of your own sin.
And think about what that really means for you, listening right now. If Lewis is correct, then every single second of your life, every breath you take, every thought in your head, your ability to choose, your will itself is a gift. It's all borrowed from the good power.
So every time we choose sin, we're not just breaking a rule.
It's more than that. Since sin is the parasitic pursuit of a good thing in a spoiled way, every deliberate act of rebellion is an act of theft. You're taking the very capability God gives you and using it against his purposes. It's a profound betrayal of the one who is lending you the power to act at all.
That completely reframes what sin is. It's not just an offense against God. It's structurally dependent on him.
Yep.
which makes it both deeply foolish and parasitic.
It does. It means the call to join the sabotage, the call to repentance and to realign yourself with the king isn't just a religious duty. It's a call to sanity, a call to stop sawing off the branch you're sitting on.
So the final question Lewis leaves us with, the thing to really mull over, is this. If you accept that every good thing in you, even your ability to will a bad thing, is borrowed from God, how does that change the way you fight in this civil war?
How seriously does it make you take the battle that's raging around you and, more pointedly, inside you? That's the depth you arrive at when you finally accept the reality of the invasion.